think we have now a few minutes for a short discussion. And I'd like to start with the following general question, basically, to all of you, each one from their own perspective, a small company, a big company, newcomer to the oil and gas industry, a company that is already there for the last few decades. In the current price scenario, companies try to reduce their costs. Why should they care about technology? Do they, in practice, allocate, cut their R&D budgets or their open innovation budget, or don't they? How does this, what is the implication basically of the current prolonged price scenario, low price scenario, to the role of technology and to acceptance of innovative technologies into the global oil and gas industry? Maybe we'll start with you, Marco.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. What we're seeing now is that actually these cash constraints that the companies are facing and this continuous low price in the oil are pushing companies to look into different ways to do business. We hear a lot talking about cost reduction. We hear a lot the words like standardization and lean collaboration throughout the supply chain. What we are seeing is that all of these, let's say, themes can be applied actually to developments of new technologies. And we see that a lot of major companies are not losing their focus on developing these technologies, of course, in a cost-effective way, but in a way that it allows them also to develop new fields in a different way, in a more cost-effective way, but also providing more production, more recovery. So I think in general, this current situation is actually providing some, let's say, good, some advantages in a way to the oil and gas industry, because it's really refocusing the entire supply chain into a much more lean and cost-effective R&D way of doing R&D. That's what we are seeing.
So basically, say any technology or any innovative technology, if it will, like the main driver would be cutting costs, being more efficient, generally speaking. But it would be interesting to hear what, I mean, one of the largest service companies in the world, soon the second one, if all regulatory issues will be over. What do you do on R&D? How is your perspective strategically wise on research and development?
Well, it's tough times indeed for the service sector and the oil industry. We, generally speaking, you know, Baker Hughes has around 80 or 90% of its revenue associated with drilling new wells. And that's usually one of the first things that go when the service companies, when the operating companies decide it's time to cut costs. So maintaining R&D budgets is extremely difficult. And generally what happens is projects get prioritized, okay? Projects that have long-term strategic objectives tend to survive. Projects that already have an end user in mind, that are easy to commercialize, take priority. And projects that are a bit more blue sky never get abandoned, but they will get lower priority. We do struggle to maintain the same level of industry involvement as we do, and the industry profile as we do. We struggle to maintain things like joint development projects with academia, for instance. Okay, so it's tough times indeed, but the core keeps going. Okay, because we are technology-driven companies, and if we don't produce technology, we don't survive. It's as simple as that.
how is it from the side of Technip? I would add to it, most of the R&D activity today would go to conventional or to unconventional oil and gas?
Within Technip, I think we're nearly entirely involved with conventional. But we're doing a lot of research and development work towards ultra-deep water. That's been going on for years. What we're doing differently at the moment is collaborating with other companies, so that we've recently formed a joint company with FMC Technologies, which enables us to make solutions for our clients which get the best out of FMC's technologies and Technip technologies in order to have a more efficient total development solution for the field. And that's covering, mainly the subsea part of it, but through our, topsides and process technologies, we can also include the platform design or process system design into it as well. So that's a way of combining technology from different organizations to give the whole industry a better overall solution.
Before I turn to the Israelis, another question to the international. How often, we know that, for example, we are more acquainted with the high-tech industry. In the high-tech industry, the open innovation platform, which means basically that the multinational sets an engagement process with different stakeholders without demanding or defining, this is what we want, this is what we're looking for, what could you suggest, but really leaving it as an open question. We're in the oil and gas business, let's say. How can you come with us with ideas? This type of engagement with different stakeholders from the oil and gas industry or not from the oil and gas industry, leaving the question open in a way. Does it sound something that sounds very strange to your ears, or is it something that you see that the industry is going more and more towards this type of engagement?
I think it sounds like a very good idea, but I think it's something that's very uncommon in the oil and gas industry.
Okay. Tony? Same?
Well, the trouble is, the industry has a paradigm. We're a commodity-based industry. We go through cycles of high price and low price, and we have a paradigm with how to deal with the low price, and that is cut costs, maintain your core business, and keep your head down until the good times come. I mean, we as an industry have seen, over the last 20 years, I think we've seen most of the major IOCs divest themselves of their research and development activities, and then just expect the service companies to catch up and take up the slack for them. A lot of the national operating companies are still doing a tremendous amount, okay? But I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but some of the famous companies that used to have huge research facilities really no longer do much significant activity. And the trouble is that, in my experience, is they expect us to do the technology, but don't expect us to pay any extra money for it.
Of course, why?
And it's becoming increasingly difficult, especially in this environment, to fill that gap.
Yeah. Ravid, I want to ask you, you've been working your company in the water industry for the last 3 decades or so, something like this, long time. And in the oil and gas industry, you've been making your steps, and now with the major or some major projects for the last 4 or 5 years, 3 to 5 years. But what is your experience as someone as a newcomer to the oil and gas industry, someone that is doing its way to get into the oil and gas industry? What are the main barriers, and what would be maybe some tips that you could give to companies that are just starting the way?
First of all, if you don't mind, related to your previous question,
of course.
At least in the perspective that we're concerned with, there are 2 factors there that in a way are not, or hopefully I would say, would not be that much influenced by the downturn or the low cost. One is that I think the tendency of oil producers in this scenario would be to prioritize additional production from existing assets rather than building new ones. And additional production meaning maybe more tendency for stimulation of existing fields and using squeezing more what you already have under the ground. And this means, from our perspective, more use of water, more enhanced oil recovery, fracking, and this kind of techniques that eventually require and produce water that creates the business for us. The other thing, in a way, is environmental regulation, and I think this is probably the only
stays and grows.
The only thing that just doesn't really care about how much oil is being sold out there. It's getting more strict with time, almost regardless of the market. And this is, in a way, a very strong driver for discharge and different solutions. The different so-called North Sea standard with the Norwegians on one end and others elsewhere. But the trend is always going stricter, and we've seen that in countries where most people would not expect standards to be very strict. They are aiming to they are making this shift, and this creates a lot of opportunity.
It's clear. If in short you can relate to my second question.
The other, from how to enter the business, as I mentioned before, it's mainly to...
I will ask it in a different... Water is water. No, what's the difference? If you know water, why should it be that different if you now go to oil and gas?
Okay, mainly two things. One, I mentioned before, the language, the mindset, the fact that it's a separate and very well-established industry with its own terms and standards and expectations, and we need to be able to go into the shoes of the clients and not try to impose what we're used to in terms of those things. In terms of the processes itself, there's a great difference because most water treatment out there, outside the oil and gas business, if you look at the chemistry or the challenge, is actually dealing with the water itself and also materials that are naturally dissolved into water or hydrophilic. Once we go into the oil and gas business, it's mostly hydrocarbons, oils, and things that are normally not suitable for many processes that we usually work with.
It's different. Eviatar, your startup company. I think that you're still on the development stage, research and development stage. Maybe first sales. I don't know. You will update us. But from your perspective, when you start trying to see how your technology could be relevant to the oil and gas industry and start speaking with different stakeholders, what are the main feedbacks, barriers, opportunities that you see?
Thank you. Well, we released a product a few months ago. One of our first customers is the Israeli national water company, Mekorot. They have about 300-400 technicians. They are selling in about $1 billion. Their experience with our system is helps them tremendously when they need to go to remote places. You know, for example, in the south, in the desert, there are several desalination plants, small desalination plants, and they need to make the field service and maintenance.
Did you have any discussions with oil and gas players at this stage?
Well, oil and gas, our experience with oil and gas is through our board. Our chairman is the chairman of a company called Paradigm, which is the leading software for oil exploration. And we are planning to go into this market very soon now.
Let's see. Lots of success. I think that our time is up. So thank you very much for the panelists. Thank you very much for the crowd. Also for your patience for additional extra 10 minutes. For additional extra 10 minutes, Mickey. Joshua allows me. Questions for the crowd?
Thank you for the good presentations. Martin, I have a few questions for you about the stimulation. First, is there any particular scenario where you say stimulation is more favorable, or more cost-effective, or more relevant? Like, is it big reservoir, small reservoir, carbonate, sandstones? Is there any particular environment which will be more, suitable for that? And also, in that respect, from what you know in Israel offshore, is this a good method to be applied? So that's the first question. I have three. Second question, maybe. Environmental concerns, are they also significant in offshore fracturing, or it's kind of more out of the scope, or not in the focus of the environmentals? And third, and this is relevant to regulation, you mentioned the role of the government to secure the maximum production. Are you aware of any regulation that requires stimulation around the world, that requires these things to be taken?
Okay, I'll deal with the last question first, because the answer is easiest. That's no. I'm not aware of any government regulation around the world that requires stimulation. Okay. Coming back to the first question. Historically, stimulation started in oil reservoirs and then spread into gas, and we spend most of our time on gas reservoirs, and the lower the permeability, the more time we spend. Okay. The vast majority of stimulation is carried out globally in the United States on tight gas and on shale gas reservoirs, and as permeability decreases, you really get to the point where there's just no alternative to hydraulic fracturing. The industry has no other technique. Nothing else comes close to the area of contact that you need with the reservoir. As permeability increases, you get to the point where it's not necessary, but it's beneficial. Okay, and when you talk about high permeability gas reservoirs, there's huge benefits to be made from reducing turbulent flow in the reservoir in the Near Wellbore area. Probably the least benefits are in high permeability oil, but there's still considerable benefits to be there. So, I mean, the answer to your question is all types of reservoirs are suitable. Gas reservoirs tend to lend themselves more, but we still do a lot of stimulation in oil reservoirs. Sandstones, carbonates, we deal with them all. Okay. The second question about environmental compliance. Quite frankly, there's a lot of bovine byproduct in the news about hydraulic fracturing. Almost everything you hear in the press is incorrect and factually incorrect. The problem is that that the general public, they're dealing with both government regulators and with big oil, and they have very little trust for either organization, sets of organizations. We see some very, very spurious
Here in
discussions.
Israel, we have the government, and there's a lot of trust.
It's this we see the fact of the matter is that the industry these days, especially the offshore industry, is extremely environmentally compliant with regards to the use of chemicals and the disposal of wastes. Okay, the Norwegian sector, it basically assumes that if you take a drum of chemicals offshore, you might as well empty the drum over the side of the vessel, as far as they're concerned. Okay, that's how tight they are, and it's very strict, and we still operate. It is up to government authorities to provide a level playing field, okay, for all the operators to work into. As far as we do an awful lot of fracking offshore. In the UK, we fracked offshore for 50 years without anybody noticing, and then suddenly the shale gas comes up in the UK, and now the frackers have cloven hooves and horns and red skin and tails. And we eat small children for breakfast. That's what's happened. My sister works in the nuclear power industry, and for years and years and years she's been complaining that everything you see in the press is incorrect. All the facts you read are incorrect. And I've gone, yeah, never mind, burn gas. And now it's happening to us. And it's just everything you read is incorrect. There isn't a single instance anywhere documented in the world of fracturing, polluting groundwater sources. But the oil industry does pollute groundwater sources, so the oil industry has a bad reputation, and it's probably very naive of us to expect the general public to tell the difference between groundwater polluted from a tank or from a poorly constructed wellbore and groundwater contaminated by fracturing, you know, but it's just a convenient handle. But I mean, we are, and we can be, very, very environmentally compliant. Does that answer all your questions?
I think that yes, and even if no, so the discussion can be continued at the coffee break or the later coffee break. I don't know exactly what is the schedule. Michael will say. I would like again to thank you everyone.